have your brush library set up and you're ready to start, let's get going on this. Okay, so go ahead and open up Autodesk Sketchbook. Guess I got to go out of this full screen. All right, Autodesk. All right, so we're gonna use our custom tool tray from the previous video. If you don't know how to set this up, I highly recommend you go back to the previous video and watch how to customize your own tool tray. Well, this happens sometimes. I don't know why. If you ever notice that Sketchbook does this to you, it will just kind of default and kick you out. It'll probably happen to you at some point, but just open it back up. It will recover what you did. Hopefully, I've never had a problem where I lost anything that I was working on before. But always, as just a rule of thumb, save, save, and save. Always save. All right, so as I was saying, keep your tools ready to go from the previous video. If you don't know how to do that, you'll need to watch the video on customizing your tool tray. If not, you will have to try to keep up with picking these tools by searching around and finding them, and that can get a little clunky. So I do not recommend you do that. So watch the video on how to create your custom tool tray. All right, so we're going to make a landscape image. You can create a image of a space scene or an underwater scene or whatever you can imagine, but just for simple learning purposes, I'm just going to do a basic sky, grass, tree. Okay, and so we'll go background, middle ground, foreground. This will be a 3-layered image. You don't necessarily shouldn't be copying exactly what I do. You kind of vary your colors and vary your placements. So don't worry about trying to follow me exactly. Just try to understand the thought process here on how to create. Okay. And so we're going to start with 3 layers, 2, 3. I'm going to shrink this down to the puck size so I can drag my layer editor up. I like to have my layer editor stretched out, especially if I'm working in numerous layers. Right. And I'm going to select my inking pen tool, ink pen. Right, and so we want to make sure that that is the right tool. And I want to select the color of sky. And so we'll go blue. You can decide on what blue value you would like or what range of blue you would like. I'm going to go real light blue here to start out. And I'm going to go big on the size, as big as I can go here. So what I'm going to do is then create my first stripe of blue. Right, and as I move up my page, I'm going to get a little bit darker every time. Layer, go a little darker. And once again, we're going to blend these layers together to create a sky. Now go dark blue now. I'm going to take this one right up to the top of the page. Let me see this. If opacity, I can tell, is down a little bit. I would recommend all the way up. It's going to be fine either way. Got a couple streaks up top here, just kind of darken those edges. All right, now I want to blend all this together with my blending tool. Down here, blending. And so starting from really anywhere, but I'm going to start up. I'm just going to blend these layers together, kind of soften their transitions from one color to another. And if I drag in from the edge, you see that? I've noticed that happens. I'm not sure why it thinks there's white right there, but if you blend from the inside to the outside, you should avoid that problem. If I blend from the outside to the inside, I'll get that. I can always just undo. Come up here at the undo button. I can undo that. No big problem. Or I can work with it. So I'm just going to stretch these out, softening my layers, softening my transitions, creating a more realistic looking sky. Look up at that sky at any given point in the day. It's not just one shade, it's not one value, or multiple values of blue up in that sky. That's what we're trying to recreate here, is those multiple value changes in blue sky, higher and higher up into the atmosphere. think that'll get the job done. Just soften the bottom edge here. All right, and so that is sky. And I do want that layer to be on the bottom, so I've noticed I've started on the top layer, so let's go ahead and drag that down to the first layer. Sky is going to be first, and then we'll do middle ground, and then our foreground. So on our background layer, sorry, this background layer, not this background layer. I kept this one white. As you can see, I could adjust that, but just for our purposes today, I'm going to keep it white. And then I'm going to put clouds on this layer as well. So to make a cloud, you're going to want a salty watercolor brush. And of course, you're going to want something kind of white, but don't go pure white. We're going to add that pure white highlight in a little bit. So just get a little bit of a light blue, just slightly blue. Okay, make sure you're selected on the proper layer. And I'm going to go in here, see our size, or that's too big. We'll shrink that down. Looks like I'm about size, about 70, 60, high 60. And then what I want to do is kind of think about these in like these kind of pyramid structures. And so when I go to make a cloud, I'm just going to kind of tap on the screen. I want to keep these gaps open. You don't want to paint this in solid. I'm just tapping on my screen. So every once in a while, maybe I do a little bit. But really, what I want to do is create open shapes, and you'll see what's going to happen in those highlights. So I'm thinking kind of like a mountain almost as I do these, kind of creating these peaks, and then at the bottom, kind of going a little more flatter. Of course, you observe clouds don't all look like this. It's just kind of what's going on in my imagination. So I'm just kind of tapping out these clouds, as many or as few as I see. Little one up here, a little wisp one here, and a little wisp of one up here. Okay, and so that'll do for the middle value on my cloud. The next thing I want to do is now I want to get that pure white, and then I'm going to come and fill those gaps. I'm just going to tap into these little open areas. Now, I'm actually kind of swirling my pencil slightly. My stylist, I should say. I'm using my stylist, and so I don't want to cover up that value you've already placed down. I'm trying to create other values in the cloud. Next time you get a chance to observe clouds, they aren't just white. There's values inside of the cloud as well. Here, a little bit here. And I'm just tapping. Every once in a while, I'll give it a little streak. Just kind of tapping this, kind of dabbing if this were, as if this were pink. Okay, maybe a couple little there. All right, so the next part is to make this look more soft, like a cloud. What I want to do is I want to select my smudge web, and then I'm going to zoom this in a little bit so I can work closer. Adjust my size. I don't want this to be huge. I just want to affect a little bit. And if you want to see my settings, these are my settings. You do want your flow pretty low on this smudge brush. I would say 11, 12, that's pretty good. My strength is pretty weak too. I would say maybe like 25%. We want to just barely affect what we're about to do here. So I'm going to find the bottom of these clouds. You see this texture of my salty watercolor brush. It's really good for clouds. But at the bottom of the cloud, I want to kind of create these kind of wispy effects. Pushing up, 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 up as I blend the bottom of my cloud. And this is a classic Bob Ross technique. You would say fluffing the cloud. You would create this kind of a flat face to it. Just these little wisps. And this is a technique you want to develop. It definitely takes a little bit of a touch to get used to, but just know this. You're just kind of fluffing the bases of these little fluff structures. And so you want to leave the top intact. Just kind of fluff the base. And that will create this multiple layer effect. It's really easy to do. Don't get overwhelmed. Practice, of course, makes perfect. And you will create some really fun, very realistic clouds. I'm softening the bottom. I do want to kind of stretch these in more of a horizontal blend. To zoom out, I can kind of see how that has softened. Go up near the top corner. I'm stretching in a horizontal direction. while also kind of fluffing into the up direction. Do that. And if it gets too noticeable, then I will rub it here and kind of flatten that out and try. Always understand you have an undo button. So undo, redo. Don't be afraid to use it. That's the whole thing about art. You can make so many mistakes. Always recover. Soften these out. Little wisps up here. Cloud wisps. Okay, and I'm feeling like this is even still too strong. I'm gonna lower the flow and strength so it's even less effective. Well, it's subtle here, very subtle. Right? Maybe every once in a while. Don't overdo this. See, I'm kind of skipping spots, creating these different layers. So I have blended, not blended, blended, not blended. Definitely get the bottom. You don't want to leave the bases of these clouds unblended. Okay. This one, every once in a while, little bits here in the middle. You can really layer these clouds with this blending technique. And if you feel like you don't have enough highlights, you can always open this back up, get that salty water brush out, and since white was the last color you used, it will still be ready for you there. Okay, and maybe you can always kind of maybe a little more gray if you're doing more of a rain cloud. You can always go in here and add a little gray or even darker than that. And when you're ready, go back to that smudge brush, go back through here and soften and fluff. All right. You can also drag the sky in. So if I want to kind of adjust the shape of the cloud, I can always do that. I want to drag this one in a little bit, find this peak a little more, and soften the edges. Right. So that's clouds. That's your basic cloud. You can go a lot more into these details. Of course, clouds come in all sorts of colors, depending on the weather around them and the time of day. You'll need to kind of pay attention to that when you're observing clouds. Just soften this little bit here, and then I'm ready for some foreground, middle ground, I should say. Yeah, that'll do it. I could go in and there's lots of little spots in there I see that need some work, but we'll stop there. It's being nitpicky sometimes as an artist can get you bogged down. So knowing when to move on is a good thing. Okay, so we're gonna go into the next layer up. This is gonna be our middle ground. And the brush I want for this is once again my inking pen. And so for the ground, I'm gonna go with some green. And we'll start with some light green to begin with. I'm thinking maybe right about there. That's a good starting value. And ink brush, make sure I'm on the correct layer. Let's get the rest of this stuff away. And so the top of my grass will be light. All right. And then moving into a little bit darker green. And then a little bit darker. And we'll go one more darker. Okay. There we go. All right, now there's a couple things you could do to this. So first thing I could do is go grab my blending stick and blend this together just like I did the blue sky above, and that would look great. But I want to show you another option for this, and that is the web smudge. And so we're going to create this kind of grassy texture, and so I want to shrink this a little smaller for my first layer. Get my interface out of the way. And so what I want to do is I'm just going to brush up. See that? And we create kind of grass, kind of break up that really hard line. That looks a little unnatural. Now, of course, I can go through here and I could add little values of green and blend that all in. And however much detail you want to go into is your choice. But this little touch will be a nice, adding a little bit of naturalism to our landscape here. All right, and as I move closer, I do want my marks to get a little bigger. So I'll just change that brush size. So smudge that right up into the dark. I am marking from down to up. So these are upward strokes. Upward strokes will create more of that brass texture. If I do downward strokes, this isn't going to work. Push this up. Get out of the way. A little bit up here. Just kind of break up that line. Here. Oh, a little bigger. Create layers of depth with color value changing. So intensity fades as the distance between you and the object. You'll see the color change. And then this is, I'll go just a touch bigger. Just a touch bigger. Oop. So again, if you get the edge of that, you're going to get that. So, a little with the software program. Luckily, you have an undo button. You can blend in all that up. All right. And that looks pretty good. All right, so we have two layers. We have a background. We have a middle ground. Now we're going to create a foreground, our third layer here. So for this tool, for this layer, I'm going to grab my ink tool, but this time I want brown. And if I click on here, I don't really have brown in my color wheel. I need to mix to create a brown. So I have another option here. You go to the user interface toggle and go down to Copic colors. Close the interface toggle. And this Copic color set is really good with the browns. And so I'm going to select the darker brown one. This is great for skin tone as well. And I'm thinking this E59 or maybe E49. These are pretty good wood colors. Dark bark, that's good. Walnut, cashew. Let's go. I like that dark bark. I'm going to close the Copic colors and make sure I'm selected on the correct layer. Okay. And then make sure my brush is huge. The reason I like to use the ink pen for this is because when I make this mark, you see how it kind of tapers away like that? And so this little pointy tip is what the ink pen will do for you. And then that's not what I want, so I'm going to clear that layer real quick. And so when I make these strokes, I'm kind of, see that? So I can create these tree branches. Right, I'm going to stick up a trunk here. Right. And then for the smaller branches, I'll just shrink my tool. I'll zoom in. And now I can make little tinier branches. And you can make as many of these as you would like. Of course, if you ever look at a tree, there is quite a lot of branches on it. So it's really the patience level you have to go into the details. That'll be good enough for our purposes. All right, so we're going to clean up the base of this tree because we want to make this kind of feel part of the ground it's in. And so I will need my ink brush still. I'm going to go to my color picker. And this time I want to get this green down here at the bottom. I want to cover it up with that green. So I'll click my eyedropper picker. And you see when I open that up, now I can decide right there. Then all I need to do is make sure I don't have a giant brush. It's going to go right over the base, just like that. And then let's go one darker just to get the front one here. And then back to that web smudge. Make sure you're still on the tree here. Not covering it a bit. Dark up that light. There we go. Blending it into that. Okay. And just to give you an idea what that looks like, if I were to take away my ground layer, you'll see that. Okay. All right. So still on the tree layer, we're going to use a signature ink brush this time. This is a really cool mark. Let's see what it looks like. It's going to leave these kind of dots on the page, and that way it makes for wonderful leaves. So we'll start with, let's go just a bit lighter than that. Not much though. My brush properties out of the way. And then I'm on my tree setting or layer. So what I want to do is kind of where I feel it will be growing a little bit big. Let's shrink this. There we go. A little indication here and there. Paying attention to how these would grow. That's why once again back to that observation point, you need to look at the things you want to create. Help you make them more realistic. We'll do a layer of these kind of light green, medium green, say. We'll push some of the darker leaves down here at the bottom. So we want to create value changes in our leaves as well. So my darker leaves are going to stay down here at the bottom. I'm going to go in here with a real light green. Little bright there. Shrink this. Changing that brush size. Absolutely add to the interest in your texture. Let's go a couple more of the real dark ones. Right down here. Darker. There we go. And remember, once again, eyedropper, I can go in here and pick an exact color if I want it. So if I want to go back to that green, do that. Tapping, tapping, tapping. Zoom out to kind of get a picture of how it's going. All right, and so there's our basic landscape with 3 layers. We have our sky layer, our ground layer, and our tree layer. Background, middle ground, foreground. And before I end this video, I do want to show you one of the tools that is really handy for duplicating things. So I'm going to take this tree. I'm going to click on this layer. You see the little circles thing there? What I want to do is duplicate this layer. All right, and so make sure I'm selected on the new layer, and I'm going to come up here to the transform option. And what I can do, I can take this tree and I can add it to distance. So I can make more trees with the tree I've already created. And I can mirror this option right here. Do you see the mirror? Flip, I guess they call it here, flip. And so I can change that, and so it doesn't look exactly the same. And I can add a new tree down here to the base. And then I just hit the green check when I'm done. These rotate that and this one flips it vertically. And this just gives a little nudge. You can do this with your finger, of course, or you can nudge it right up here. And then this one right here, this is the distort. What this will do is kind of change its spot in the, you can kind of change the plane that it's on. Okay. And so, yeah, and I can always just cancel that if I don't like what's going on. Once again, let's transform. That'll duplicate your layer. That's the first step. And then you can make adjustments this way too. So that's just a fun way to populate something in multiple ways on the computer. You can't do that on your normal painting. So, all right, create a landscape, an image. It doesn't have to necessarily be a landscape. It could be a space scene. Maybe you want to do some space with stars in the background instead of clouds and some nebulas. And you could create planets with a circle template if you would like. But really what I'm looking for is something using up to 2 or 3 layers. Okay, so landscapes are what I find to be the easiest to do that with, but if you have another idea that you think would make a really good layered image, then you can try that out as well. So have fun, and I hope this gets you started on Autodesk Sketchbook.